May 6, 2025, Hollow Creek River, Vermont. The water was murky that morning, thick with spring runoff and broken twigs. The river lapped against the diver's suit as he reached down towards something glinting in the silt. He thought it was just another beer cap, but when his glove brushed against velvet, deep maroon, almost black with age, his breath caught. Carefully, he surfaced. On the muddy shore, Park Ranger Elaine Torres unlatched the box and froze. Inside, nestled in a damp silk cushion, was a delicate gold band, a wedding ring. Etched inside were the words, "Forever D+E." But what made her blood run cold wasn't the ring. It was the small folded note tucked beneath it. The paper was dry, the ink somehow fresh. Scrawled in a hurried hand, it read, "Daniel, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disappear." Emma, May 6, 2013. 12 years to the day, and Emma Carter's voice had just returned from the grave. What comes next will change everything. To uncover the truth hidden in the shadows, stay with us. Subscribe to Missing Shadows, where every story whispers a secret. Daniel Reed stared at the empty chair across from him, the steam rising from his untouched coffee curling like a ghost between them. He came to Maple Street Cafe every Thursday, same time, same table, just like they used to. Once, Daniel had been the town's golden boy, captain of the varsity team, class valedictorian, son of the mayor. When he proposed to Emma Carter at the annual Christmas tree lighting in 2012, the whole town had cheered. Now, 12 years later, he was a man made of echoes. He still wore the same leather wristwatch she had gifted him, a little frayed around the edges now. He still drove the old green pickup truck with the "Just Engaged" sticker faintly visible on the rear bumper. And he still refused to remove the wedding invitation pinned above his fireplace. Daniel worked as a high school English teacher. He taught about hope and redemption, but rarely believed in either. He smiled in the hallways, handed out A's generously, and attended football games on Friday nights. But the fire behind his eyes had long burned out. People in town had long stopped asking about Emma. At first, the whispers were kind, sympathetic. Then came the theories. She got cold feet, ran off with someone else, faked her death. Each rumor had carved something invisible but permanent into Daniel's soul. But he never stopped searching. Every anniversary, he'd visit her childhood home. Every spring, he'd walk the trail behind Hollow Creek, where they used to sneak kisses under the sycamores. And every night, before bed, he'd whisper her name into the silence of his apartment. He wasn't a man clinging to the past. He was a man married to a memory. And now, with one ring, one note, and a name in fresh ink, his world was about to unravel all over again. May 6, 2013, the day of the wedding. The morning sun had risen behind thick gray clouds, casting a dull silver over the sleepy town of Willowbrook. It was supposed to be a perfect day. The garden behind the old Carter farmhouse had been transformed into a scene from a magazine. Ivory roses, linen drapes swaying in the wind. The wooden arch where Daniel would soon say, "I do." Emma had laughed nervously that morning, her bridesmaids fluttering around her like butterflies. She wore her mother's lace wedding dress, fitted and elegant, her hair twisted in a loose braid woven with baby's breath. Daniel remembered the last text she sent him. "Don't cry when you see me. I practiced my walk all night." He still had that message saved, untouched, starred at the top of his inbox, but she never walked down the aisle. At 11:47 a.m., just 2 hours before the ceremony, Emma left the bridal suite saying she needed some fresh air. A neighbor saw her walking toward Hollow Creek, her dress hem gathered in her hands, her face unreadable. And then she was gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints past the bend. Her cell phone, bouquet, and bridal shoes were found resting neatly on a flat rock near the water. As if she had simply undressed and stepped into the current, the town went into a frenzy. Search parties combed the woods. Helicopters circled for days. Dogs picked up her scent, then lost it at the river's edge. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Secret lover, runaway bride, suicide pact. But Daniel never believed any of it. He knew Emma. He knew the way her hand trembled before she said something important. He knew the little catch in her breath when she was hiding something. And he knew, without logic, without evidence, that she had not left him, not willingly. The trauma fractured him in quiet ways. He stopped playing music. Emma used to love when he strummed his old acoustic guitar, but it now sat in the corner collecting dust. He stopped visiting his parents, unable to stomach their forced cheer and awkward pity. His friends drifted away, unsure of how to exist around his grief that never moved, never changed. In public, he was composed, functioning, but at night, when the lights were off, he'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was cold, if she was hungry, if she was still out there, calling his name, and perhaps worst of all, wondering if she had forgotten his. 12 years had passed, and yet the memory of that day, the silence of that archway, the way the guests began to murmur, the way his heart collapsed in on itself, remained vivid, fresh, as if time had stood still for him while the rest of the world moved on. Until now. Because today, a ring had resurfaced, and with it, a question that had haunted him for 12 years. What if she never left the river at all? May 6th, 2025, exactly 12 years later. Hollow Creek River Cleanup Initiative, 9:12 a.m. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't do anniversaries anymore. They had become too painful, too hollow. But something about this morning felt different. Maybe it was the storm that passed through the night before, leaving the town washed and trembling. Maybe it was the email he'd received from the park department last week, inviting local volunteers to help clean up the riverbanks. Or maybe it was the date, 12 years to the day. He had shown up in silence, hands in pockets, wearing a hoodie to keep his face down. Volunteers buzzed around him, students, town workers, retired couples with trash grabbers and yellow vests. He didn't speak, just stared at the river. That's when he saw Elaine Torres, the head park ranger, waving someone over. A diver in a soaked black wetsuit stumbled out of the water, clutching a small object. Everyone gathered around curiously. Daniel didn't move until he heard someone say, "It's a ring box." He turned slowly. By the time he got to them, the velvet box was already open. Elaine's gloved fingers trembled as she held it up. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. It was hers. There was no mistaking it. He had picked that ring himself after saving 3 paychecks and spending an entire afternoon pacing outside the jewelry store. The tiny nick on the inner edge, from the time Emma dropped it on the patio and they both laughed, was still there. But it wasn't just the ring. Elaine lifted a small note, folded neatly, still dry despite the waterlogged box. Her voice wavered as she read aloud. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disappear." Emma, May 6, 2013. Daniel staggered back. The world tilted slightly. The date on the note was the same day she vanished, but the ink, it looked fresh. No smudging, no bleeding from water, not even age stains. It was as if it had been written that morning. One of the college interns nearby mumbled something about ink preservation or forensic testing, but Daniel didn't hear it. All he could hear was her voice, her handwriting, that loop in the D she always exaggerated, and the fact that after 12 years of silence, Emma had spoken. He held the ring delicately, like it might disappear again if he blinked. The metal was cold but familiar, like holding a piece of time that had no right to still exist. Memories flooded in, her laugh echoing on the bridge. The way she used to hold her coffee mug with both hands. The smell of her favorite vanilla perfume. And then something even more jarring, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was terrifying. Because this wasn't closure. It wasn't a grave or a confession or a goodbye. This was a message. A deliberate one. Left in a place Daniel had walked past hundreds of times. Which meant someone, Emma or otherwise, had just put it there. Recently. He looked at Elaine, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where exactly did you find it?" She pointed to a shallow bend in the river near the old sycamore tree, the same tree where Emma had kissed him for the first time in sophomore year. Daniel's chest tightened. This wasn't coincidence. This was a trail, a breadcrumb, a door creaking open after being sealed shut for a decade, and for the first time in 12 years, he wasn't afraid to walk through it. The box sat on Daniel's kitchen counter like a relic from a life he no longer lived. He hadn't touched it since the river. Just stared at it, like it might speak again. The ring, the note, the handwriting. It was real. He'd gone to bed trying to convince himself it wasn't, that maybe someone played a cruel joke, that the water preserved the note by some odd miracle. But as the night gave way to morning, one truth refused to loosen its grip. Emma was reaching out. May 7th, 2025. Willowbrook Police Station, Detective Mira Lawson had joined the force 5 years after Emma disappeared. Daniel had never worked with her directly, but she knew of him. Everyone in Willowbrook did. He placed the ring box and note carefully on her desk. She eyed him cautiously before picking up the letter with tweezers and sliding it into a plastic sleeve. "You said this was found yesterday," she asked. Daniel nodded. "Near Hollow Creek, just below the sycamore tree." Her brow furrowed. "It's not weathered. The ink hasn't bled. We'll send it to forensics. But I've never seen paper hold like that after 12 years in water." "It hasn't been in the river for 12 years, Daniel said. "Someone put it there recently." Lawson looked at him, hard. "You think she's still alive?" Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't say it aloud, couldn't admit how badly he wanted that to be true. She exhaled. "I'll reopen the case under active missing, but I need more than a ring and a note. We need a lead. Anything else you remember?" He hesitated. There was a phone call, the night before the wedding. Flashback, May 5th, 2013, 10:16 p.m. Emma had stepped out onto the porch. Daniel had watched her through the window as she spoke quietly into her phone, pacing in the moonlight. When she came back in, she was pale. He'd asked who it was. She smiled too quickly and kissed him. "Just my cousin." "Nervous energy," she had said. He never questioned it again. Back in the present, Daniel clenched his fists. "Whoever called her that night, I need to know who it was." May 8th, 2025, Emma's childhood home. The house had long been empty. Her parents had moved away a year after her disappearance, unable to bear the constant reminders. But the property still sat in the family's name. Daniel walked through the creaking door with a heavy heart. Dust blanketed the furniture like time itself had stood still. A faint scent of lavender, Emma's favorite, still lingered. In her old room, he opened drawers, flipped through yearbooks, ran his hands along the chipped desk she'd used to write poems. Nothing. Until he opened the jewelry box. Inside, among old hairpins and dried-out lipstick tubes, he found a worn cassette tape labeled in Emma's handwriting. 4D, if anything ever happens. His hands trembled. Back in his apartment, Daniel stared at the tape deck, unsure whether to hit play. This wasn't just a clue. This was a piece of her soul, a message meant only for him. He pressed play. The tape hissed for a few seconds. Then her voice. "Hey, Daniel, I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but if you are, then something went wrong. I'm scared. I think someone's following me. It's not just wedding jitters, it's bigger than that. I've been keeping something from you. I didn't want to, but I had to protect you. Static. A few seconds of silence. Then, if I disappear, look for the truth near the water. Start where we began. The tape clicked off. Daniel sat frozen, heart pounding. She knew. She knew something was coming for her, and she'd left a trail for him to follow. Questions now swirled like a storm. Who was following her? What was she hiding? Why had she never told him? Daniel stood and looked out his window at the sycamore trees swaying in the wind. He no longer cared how long it had been. He didn't care what it cost. He was going to find her, even if it meant facing whatever had taken her away. May 9th, 2025. The phone records detective Mira Lawson was good at what she did, detailed, unshakable, and known for pulling secrets out of sealed vaults. When Daniel returned with the cassette tape, she took it seriously. Within 48 hours, she had pulled phone records from the night of May 5th, 2013. The last incoming call to Emma's phone had come from a blocked number, but it wasn't untraceable. After running it through archival databases, the number came back to a landline registered to Eleanor Reed. Daniel froze when Lawson read the name aloud. "My mother?" he said, voice hollow. Lawson nodded. "I double-checked. It was your parents' home line." Daniel's throat tightened. That's not possible. She had no reason to call Emma. They barely talked. Lawson looked at him carefully. "You're sure?" Daniel stood, anger simmering beneath disbelief. "She said she supported the wedding. She smiled, hugged Emma, even helped with the guest list." "Then maybe she was hiding something," Lawson replied. "You should ask her." May 10th, 2025. The Reed residence. The same house he'd grown up in now felt foreign. Stale air, clean floors, framed family photos on the wall that no longer matched the warmth he remembered. His mother sat on the sunlit porch pruning roses, her movements calm, too calm. "Why did you call Emma the night before our wedding?" he asked. She froze mid-clip. The silence between them stretched like a taut string. "I was trying to protect you," she finally said, voice low. Daniel stepped closer. "From what?" Her hands trembled slightly. "From her past. From the things she didn't tell you." "What are you talking about?" She sighed and set the shears down. "She came to me a week before the wedding. She told me someone had been following her, a man she once dated. He'd shown up in town, sent her letters, said if she didn't back out of the wedding, he'd ruin everything." Daniel stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because she begged me not to. She said if you found out, you'd go after him. And she was right. You would have gotten hurt." Daniel felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. "She was trying to protect you," his mother said, "but she was scared. That night I called her to ask if she was okay. She said she was leaving town for a day, just until the man left. She promised to come back." Daniel clenched his fists. "She never came back." "I know," his mother whispered, her eyes wet now. "I thought maybe she'd change her mind. But when the police couldn't find anything, I thought maybe he'd made good on his threat." Daniel's thoughts raced. If Emma had known this man was in town, if she disappeared because of him, then maybe she hadn't left the ring. Maybe he had. May 11th, 2025, Detective Lawson's office. Daniel paced the room as Lawson reviewed the information. "If this man existed," he said, "there must be a record. Letters, messages, sightings." Lawson nodded. "We'll dig through Emma's emails, journals, anything we can find. But if he was the one following her, and he resurfaced now, we could be dealing with something far worse than a lost bride." Daniel sat down heavily. "He still has her, doesn't he?" Lawson didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said everything. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every moment. Emma's nervous glances in the days before the wedding, her reluctance to talk about certain parts of her past, her long walks alone near the river. He thought he knew her, but now he realized she'd been carrying a burden she never dared speak aloud. And perhaps the biggest twist of all, she hadn't run. She hadn't vanished. She had been hunted. And if the ring was a clue left recently, then one terrifying question hung in the air. Had the man brought her back, only to taunt him again? The past wasn't done with Daniel Reed, and he wasn't done with it either. May 14th, 2025, Hollow Creek, just before midnight. The trees were hushed, still as statues, their branches whispering ancient secrets as the wind shifted through the woods. Daniel stood alone beneath the sycamore where it had all begun and where, apparently, it had never ended. In his pocket was the cassette tape. Around his neck, Emma's ring hung from a chain. Detective Lawson had gone quiet in the past 48 hours. The department was investigating a lead, but Daniel had heard nothing. So he returned to the only place that had ever made sense: the river. The last place she was seen. The first place he'd ever loved her. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A small envelope pinned to the base of the sycamore with a rock. Pale blue, handwritten. Daniel, his knees nearly buckled. Hands trembling, he opened the letter. My Daniel, I don't know if this will reach you or when, but if it does, then it means I found a way. The truth is, I never left you. Not really. He took me, the man from before, the one I told no one about. I thought I could disappear and keep you safe, but I was wrong. He was always watching, always near. I've lived in shadows for 12 years under his threat, behind his walls, a prisoner in plain sight. I tried to escape once. He punished me for it. I stopped trying. Until now. I left the ring. I knew you'd find it. You were always the only one who saw me clearly. If you're reading this, please don't come looking for me. He's dangerous, and I won't let him hurt you too. But God help me. I still love you. I never stopped. Emma Daniel sank to the ground, the letter shaking in his hands, his breath broken and uneven. She had been alive all this time. Not missing, not gone, stolen. Every moment he had lived without her now burned in his chest like a cruel joke. The birthdays spent alone, the anniversaries, the nights whispering her name into nothing. She had been out there, caged, silenced, and waiting. And now she was telling him not to come. Number Daniel stood slowly, fists clenched. This wasn't how their story would end. He had spent 12 years loving a ghost. Now he knew she was real, still breathing, still reaching for him in the only way she could. He couldn't stop now. He wouldn't. He pulled out his phone and called Lawson, straight to voicemail. He didn't wait. He sent a photo of the letter in a single message. He's still out there. She's alive, and I'm going to find her. As he walked back toward his truck, the woods behind him seemed to shift. Like something ancient had awakened. He didn't know where this road would lead, but for the first time in years, his heart was no longer broken. It was on fire. 2 weeks later, safe house outside Boston. The news broke quietly, a single headline buried in the local paper. Kidnapped survivor rescued after 12 years in captivity. But for Daniel Reed, it wasn't just a headline. It was the end of one life and the beginning of another. Emma had been found in an abandoned farmhouse 60 miles from Willowbrook. The man who took her, Stephen Callan, an ex-boyfriend from her college years, had used different identities, back roads, and fear to keep her hidden. He'd threatened her, erased her from the digital world, and convinced her that if she ran, Daniel would die. She believed him until something inside her, the smallest spark of faith, made her hide that ring. write that note, and leave it where she first loved him. When the authorities stormed the farmhouse, she was thin, quiet, and half shadow, but she was alive. Daniel wasn't allowed to see her right away. Trauma specialists, doctors, and federal agents surrounded her recovery. But every day, he waited, quietly, patiently, like he had for 12 years. When they finally let him into the small counseling room, she looked at him as if no time had passed. Tears welled in her eyes. "You came." He stepped closer, voice cracking. "You called." They didn't embrace right away. The space between them was filled with ghosts. Time couldn't be undone, but healing, slow and honest, had begun. In the weeks that followed, Daniel left his teaching job. He moved to a smaller town near Emma's care center. He didn't ask for anything, didn't rush her, just showed up when she wanted him to, waited outside when she didn't. The ring still on its chain around his neck was never forced back on her finger. Not yet, maybe not ever, but it was there, a reminder of love that refused to die, even when everything else did. And Emma, she smiled more now. Sometimes they'd sit beneath a tree in the park, not the sycamore, but a new one, a fresh place. She'd lean her head against his shoulder, and for a moment, the world would grow quiet. There were still nightmares, still moments when she flinched at sudden sounds, but she was learning how to breathe again. And Daniel? He had spent over a decade searching for answers, haunted by silence. Now, finally, he was learning how to live in the presence of peace. Love doesn't always end with closure. Sometimes it waits in silence. Sometimes it hides in a river bend or a cassette tape buried in dust. Sometimes it survives not because it is easy, but because it is true. Daniel once believed the worst part of loss was not knowing, but now he understood. The real weight came with rediscovery, with holding someone you never thought you'd see again, and realizing they're no longer the same. And maybe that was okay, because love, at its strongest, is not the ability to hold on. It's the courage to begin again. As Emma closed her eyes beneath the spring sky, and Daniel sat beside her in quiet faith, one truth remained. Some stories don't end. They simply find a new way to be told. Craving twisted mysteries and haunting tales? Hit subscribe before the story fades into the shadows.